they were able to literally change and increase instruction time by 22.8% in less than an academic year and increase instruction time to 40%.
Pivots. It's not a matter of if, but when. And it's how we embrace them that sets us apart, personally, professionally. Those that are GSDers know how to embrace the pivot and the change in life. Our guest today is just that. She is a GSDer who has embraced her latest pivot into the education tech space. She's going to share about what her company Chalk Coaching is doing, unlocking the potential of our teachers in the classroom for our tiny humans that are ages 3 to 6. And by empowering and equipping these teachers, we are unlocking the potential for our next generation of leaders. Let's jump into the conversation with Yesenia Sevilla as we talk about how we can get shit done in the midst of the pivot. Yesenia Sevilla, welcome to the GSD Factor podcast again, friend. You are one of our boomerangs. I love that. And I affectionately call you Yessie. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Misha. And absolutely, please call me Yessie. And I love being a boomerang. It's the first time I've been called that. I love it.
Absolutely. So we are here to talk different things today, which I'm very excited about, your new venture, and we're going to get into that. But first of all, share everybody a little bit about you and your story.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I have a very non-linear story in that I have really gone from opportunity to opportunity as opposed to this checklist kind of life. And I really believe that if you move from opportunity to opportunity based on your skill set, you have a more exciting life. And so I've gone from higher education to biotechnology to life sciences to innovation. And now I find myself in the EdTech SaaS space, working with early childhood education. So I've had this sort of trajectory of what is the next adventure? And that's where I find myself right now.
You have embraced every pivot along the way. And with each pivot is a brand new milestone for you that you are crushing. You are getting shit done. And I applaud you for that because I think so many times people they get complacent and they get okay with where they're at, but you have always continued to push the bounds, go to the next thing and say, what is that next pivot? What is that next adventure? Talk about that mindset for a moment before we get into your new venture.
Absolutely. And let's be truthful about life. You know, one can say, oh, I'm this brave pivot person. Some of my pivots have been unwelcome, right? Mm-hmm. I think that not every pivot has been, hey, let's pivot. Some of your audience may know, some don't. I've also have done a TED Talk where I share that I have an incredible number of layoffs, right? Some were, companies acquiring companies. Others were reorganizations. And so sometimes the pivot comes to you, whether you're ready or not. And so the idea of change and of the pivot, it doesn't come without fear, and it doesn't come without discomfort, and it doesn't come without apprehension. It's what you do in the face of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that I was immediately comfortable with pivots early in life. It's that I've learned over time that pivots, although uncomfortable and although sometimes very fearful, can bring out incredible opportunities on the other side, right? And so the way I look at it is courage isn't doing things because you're not afraid. Courage is doing things when you're afraid and doing them anyway. And so when you think about pivot in your career or pivot in doing something that's totally new, it's because you're learning about something completely different outside of your comfort zone, because there's something even more amazing on the other side. And so some pivots, because there's a career change, because there's a layoff, because there's a reorganization, because you have to move, because there's a change in your family. Pivots can bring about such growth. It's what you do with it, right? And so for me, that's what it's been about. It's what can I do with the change? And we can either be victims of change or we can be masters of change. And I don't want to be a victim. And that's how I look at it.
You are a master of change, getting shit done, which is amazing. And
Absolutely.
and so many nuggets that you've dropped on our listeners there. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So now let's embrace our EdTech pivot and talk about chalk and what it is and what you're doing. And I'm a huge supporter. I, love the education space, love the tech space. But as a mom to two tiny humans, I think the work that you're doing to really empower the teachers to care and guide our students at those early ages is so crucial and so important. And I'm really honored to have you on to talk about that and amplify this message because we are going to help them get stuff done in these early years. So let's talk chalk.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to talk chalk. So let's do a little bit of the history. So part of this whole pivot and part of my why is exactly what you're talking about. So I'm a mom too. And let's be clear, you don't have to be a mom to really honor and love early childhood education, right? Our future and everything that we do as a society hinges on, how our tomorrow is built and how our tomorrow is reinforced and substructured, right? And that pivots and lands on how children are developed, right? But as a mom, and mothers come in all shapes and sizes and genders, let's just say that. As a mom, there's this special little kernel inside. I have two littles that are now 26 and 24, so maybe not so little. But I was at Vanderbilt University in the innovation space watching 500 to 600 innovations a year. But for the last couple of years, there's been this little engine that could on campus doing incredible research on 3 to 6 year olds, right? And there's always been a gap, and we knew that it's been growing specifically in the United States, but globally, on children's ability to self-regulate, specifically in the age of technological revolution, right? And this phygital age that we call it, where the physical world and the digital world are really coming together. Artificial intelligence, everything that's happening, which some of us find really exciting and some of us are really scared of. Okay. So we've got all of this happening around the world and children lagging behind what's happening in terms of the space of learning. And we know that more and more children are not meeting the third grade assessments around the world. So let's go back to looking at it from the US perspective, even though it's a global problem. What we know, and this is a lot of pre-COVID numbers. So post-COVID, these numbers are much worse. But pre-COVID numbers, we know globally 347 million children on average a year do not read at their level. Post-COVID worse. Let's just focus on the US. So on the US level, if you think about children being at their level, just at that third grade level, and you think foundationally they just get farther and farther behind, and you think about that this is the substrate of our future workforce, and this is everything that we're banking our future on. How do we get better and stronger, and how do we ensure our future success? We have to reverse engineer this engine. So we have to go younger and younger and younger. Now, layer in all my mom feelings, and I'm thinking, okay, we got to do more for our littles. So the research that was being done on campus was looking at where is the foundation of education happen? Now, we know it happens 0 through 6. And we know that a lot of the foundational work happens 3 to 6. So 3 to 6, neuroplasticity of the brain, that's where they get introduced to the environment of education. Pre-kindergarten, kindergarten. So 3 to 6 research. And what was done in US classrooms, Swedish classrooms, Portuguese classrooms, and South African classrooms was what really impacts self-regulation, math proficiency, reading proficiency, and language proficiency. And they found nine magic things, 9 practices that really impact children. And these practices don't cost money to do, but we have to teach teachers how to do these 9 practices, right? So now that we know these 9 practices, how do we do them? And this was such amazing research that the National Science Foundation, a federal program, granted almost $2.8 million to these researchers to build software, to then coach teachers on how to do these practices, how to get observed in their classrooms, how to build action plans, and how to do this. So fast forward to last year, around October-ish, one of the founders and one of the programmers of the software, a brilliant woman and one of my favorite friends, Dina Metter, she's at an inflection point. Software is built, 100 classrooms that were part of the pilot are using it. In 4 states, we have all these teachers that help build it and love it. We've got these classrooms using it. It's impacting kids. What do we do now, right? As happens in a lot of universities all over the world, not just here in the US, you get to this inflection point that either someone picks up the ball and runs with it, or it just sits. And unfortunately, these projects just die. They become what's called project orphans, right? And it happens all too often. And so what we need to do is get shit done, right? More and more people around the world and in this country, and people like you and me, need to know that we can go to campuses around this country and ask them, what orphan projects do you have that some of us regular people can pick up and get shit done with? And she came to me and said, do you want to do this with me? And she licensed the technology from Vanderbilt. And I quit my job December 31st and said, holy cow, pivot. And her and I are going to commercialize this, and we're going to bring this to every classroom in the US and then the world, because our teachers deserve to know how to bring impact, and our littles deserve to really become experts at their own self-regulation, and they deserve the chance to get the biggest impact at math proficiency, reading proficiency, language proficiency that they can. And the statistic that is the scariest statistic, pre-COVID, 40% of children that entered kindergarten were 1 to 3 years behind. And it was worse post-COVID. So that tells you that children are not even entering kindergarten at the right level. So every year they get further and further behind. So then imagine what happens in 3rd grade. Imagine what happens then in 9th grade. Imagine what happens then getting ready for college or vocational schools. And imagine what happens then to the workforce. So regardless of where you are in terms of understanding education or kids or being a mom or a dad or neither, wherever you are in society, you need the future to be structured on a solid foundation. And the foundation of our future is how we educate children. And so to me, this pivot was a no-brainer. We need to do this. And if not us, who? And if not now, when?
So talk to us about the results that you guys saw when you implemented these practices, these magic 9.
So amazing. So some of the examples. So for example, one of the 9 is transition times. So one of the things that is really, really important is the amount of time or percentage of time in the day of the pre-K or kindergarten classroom that's actually spent on instruction. So one of the things that's observed for is transition times. How much time is being spent on transition? And so over the course of less than a calendar year, right? Because academic years are less than a calendar year, we had a classroom that was assessed on transition times. And we saw that they were spending 30% of their time learning because of all of the transitions that the children were doing because a lot of their structured classes were in pods, in those portable pods. And so the littles were having to move classrooms. So really good intentions, right? But you were moving children too often. And by doing the observations and doing and checking for that practice, they were able to literally change and increase instruction time by 22.8% in less than an academic year and increase instruction time to 40%.
Incredible.
And that is huge. And again, it's intentionality, right? No one was saying we don't want to teach them. No one was being a bad teacher. It's observation, and it doesn't cost money, right? It's reorganizing the day. It's things that we don't necessarily know or had known in the past, and no one was intending upon these. It's just once you know better, do better. These are the kinds of things. Another one, for example, that we know is classroom climate. In other words, do the children feel welcome? Do they feel like there's belonging? Well, one way to do that is, do you use what's called behavior improvements, or do you use behavior reprimands? In other words, negative comments versus positive comments. And we know through the research now that's validated that if you use behavior improvement, positive comments, the children actually do better. So we have a classroom that was their ratio was like, it was really abysmal. The ratio was like 13 to 4, negative to positive commentary. And we flipped the script and they went to something like 3 to 5. So it was something like only 3 negative comments for every 5 positive comments. And again, less than an academic year. And so that's a complete ratio flip, right? 13 negative to 5 positive, going from 3 negative to 5 positive. That is a complete switch, right? And so these are things that you can effectively change. Other things that can be changed are the percentage of time in a day that a child speaks versus an adult speaks. So when you're talking about language proficiency, children need to speak more than their instructors. And one way that happens is asking open-ended questions versus yes and no questions. And so instead of asking a lot of yes and no questions, ask less questions with more open-ended answers, and then allow for the uncomfortable silence. So these are little things that help create classrooms where you're actually impacting the 3 to 6-year-old better. And it's something that can make all classrooms more equitable in terms of quality. So you could be a 30-year teacher or a 2-week brand new teacher and have equitable quality in your classroom. And as parents, that means you don't have to play classroom roulette anymore, which means you don't have to worry about which classroom your child gets assigned, because if they're all practicing chalk practices, you have then equitable quality in your classrooms.
What I appreciate is the science behind it, because it's not about, well, I think that this would work, or this is my perception. I'm all about the data. I'm all about the science. Show me the studies. Talk to us about who was involved and really tracking that and being intentional with it, because I think this is one of those differentiators in the space around saying, like, this is how I think that this is, or this is my perception of this, when this is the actual facts and the actual science and data behind it.
Absolutely. Well, and also for teachers, right? Because the norm out there is observing maybe once a year on, sort of Likert scale ranges, which are very subjective, right? 1 to 5, you're a 3, get better. Nobody knows what that means. That's not actionable. It's not a tangible goal that you can have, and it's very subjective based on who the observer is, right? So the studies were done across hundreds and hundreds of classrooms where everything you can imagine was measured, including things as silly as the depth of mulch in the playground, right? I'm not even kidding. But more importantly, it was a long arm research. So the children were followed for years to track the impact of all of these possible practices. And that's how they were able to validate that these practices had the most impact. And then the most important thing is that the way that the practices are implemented is that any teacher can implement these practices. And when you observe for the practices, it's not subjective, right? It's not, I think you only had 2 minutes of transition time. You actually have a timer and you count how much time is in transition, how much time it took to line children up in a classroom. We started a timer and it took a minute to line kids up, right? So it's not about liking a teacher or disliking a teacher. It's not about liking a classroom or disliking a classroom. It's how much time did the kids talk? I mean, it's a timer, right? And it's not about subjective, we think the classroom is friendly. It's not. It's how many positive things were said, how many negative things were said, right? And so that is something that we can objectively measure and objectively validate. And then by following these students for years, you then can see their assessments and you can see their third grade assessments and you can see how many of them went to college and you can see how many of them did well in high school and how many of them went on to succeed. And so those validation studies that show that they did better, that they went on to succeed, that their third grade is set, that's what we need. So that's why we can say we're validated in pre-kindergarten and kindergarten. And that's the science. And that's what teachers need, right? So in our platform, the teachers get observed. They get the feedback instantly. They can be observed multiple times in the year, which the other problem is, if you only observe a teacher once a year and you do it and you tell them kind of near the end, does it even impact the children in that year? You kind of lost the ability to help those kids that year. So teachers aren't given much to work with. It's like you're hampering them. You're really not helping them. You're not giving them anything actionable. And it's kind of unfair. You're putting the weight on the world on these teachers without really giving them anything that they can action on to help the students that year. So the students are behind, the teachers are behind, but you expect the world. And that's just an unfair way to do it.
When I think about the business world, right, we always have these ideas and then we have these hypotheses and then we say, let's prove it. And a lot of times with my own clients, I'll ask them, we'll focus on business development, for example, and I'll say, what is your life cycle today of a deal? Meaning that introduction point to the signing of a deal. And 9 times out of 10, they give me a number. 9 times out of 10, it's not backed up by data. And part of what I help them with is let's look at the data. And I recently had a client that was like, oh, we're at like 45 days. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Dug into it with them and very quickly found that their life cycle was actually 100 days. So we do this in the business world.
Yes.
And what you are doing is equipping our education system and our classrooms where our tiny humans are spending the bulk of their time. And we are really establishing that foundation. And so my challenge to our listeners is if you are solutioning in the business world and in your lives in this way, why wouldn't you solution for the humans in your life, for the education system, which we are preparing our future leaders, right? In that moment, why wouldn't you apply those concepts and apply those philosophies and the data and say, okay, wow, I had a perception of X. In reality, it is Y. Now, let's not make this an orphaned project like you talked about, but now let's do something about it because we now know about it. And now we are charged with being influential to get shit done.
Absolutely. And we've gone a step further in that the way that we've built the software is it lives in a cloud and the membership is by classroom so that it's not by user. So the teacher has access. If there's any instructional coaches, they have access and the administrators have access so they can see all the classrooms. The data, we save all the data. It's aggregated. So you could see it over time. You could see everyone all at once. You could all look at it together. So the example I said about, the classrooms and the portables, everyone can sit down together and maybe say, okay, maybe the littles that use the portables, maybe those classrooms need to be moved right next to the portables. Or maybe they only move in the mornings so that they just go to the portables in the morning and then they hop portables and then they come back, right? Like solve the problems together once you know about them and then have the data all the time, right? So why not then keep the data? The data is yours and we let you have it and it belongs to you. In fact, we have a testimonial from some users, actually with the United Way here in Greater Nashville, where the teachers love it because they control their own data. They have it for the first time and it's actionable. They know what to do with it. It's making an impact on their students' lives and they've never had data. They only had subjective opinions. And it's so empowering for the teachers to actually do something with the data that they've never had before. And that's what we're about. But if nothing else, it's the perfect example, as you said, of getting shit done. When you know better, do better.
Exactly right. So we wanted to have you on to share about this amazing organization, the amazing data behind it, especially supporting our future leaders and our tiny humans. I would imagine that there's probably two asks, right? Number
Yes.
one, those that want to get involved to support you all. And the second ask is those that are out there that want to implement this. So
Yes.
give a call to action for both of those journeys.
All right. So yes, so there are two journeys. So everything can be found on www.chalkcoaching.com. So the two asks. So for anyone who has an educational school or institution or system, one of the things about what we do is we are not curriculum and we are not any sort of curriculum basis. We are agnostic. We can be layered on top of any type of curriculum, be public, private, charter, Montessori, indoor school, outdoor school, it doesn't matter. So if you want to implement our program, you can go right to our website, book a demo. We're all there. Please reach out to me on the website. You can have all of my contact information. And we do know that there are smaller, underserved schools that are going to need some help with funding. We also have a sponsorship page, and we also currently have a GoFundMe page for any parents or any sponsors who want to help underserved community schools or underserved charter schools that need help with getting access to membership. So that if you want to sponsor a school, you can also go to our website and you can find all of those details, because one of the things that we want to do is bring chalk to as many schools as possible, but we understand that there will sometimes be limitations. So we're going to do both. We're going to bring you chalk. And if you have trouble getting us, we're going to find you funding. So we're going to do both. So the ask is for both. So if you're a parent and you want chalk in your school, go to our website. If you're a school and you want chalk, go to our website. If you want to sponsor chalk in a school, go to our website. We're going to do all of the things because we want teachers to get empowered. We want teachers to get the data, and we want the littles to get a fair shot at starting at the same starting line and be the leaders we need them to be.
Thank you for being on the show and sharing this exciting pivot that you have embarked on. And thank you for being a champion for our tiny humans and our littles. I think it's so important in today's day and age. And, I have a kindergartner myself, and I think, and I also have a fourth grader, right? And so I have both sides of it. And I think it is so important, and it's why we need to get it out there. And thank you to you and Dina for saving this project from being an orphan project. And I think, we talk a lot with a lot of entrepreneurs and investors and founders. And I think there are more orphan projects out there than we probably even realize.
Yes.
But they could be those projects that could literally change the world or change our populations. And so thank you for saving this one. And to our listeners, thank you for listening to today's episode. We will have everything in the show notes. And Yessie, any final thoughts about either pivots or equipping the next generation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and letting me share my story. My final thoughts about pivots. Please find the courage to do what makes you afraid. And second, anyone and everyone is an innovator. Go find an orphan project that will make the world better and be the person to pick it up and make it happen.
Amazing.
Thank you, Misha.
Let's get shit done.
Let's get shit done.
Thank you for listening to the GST Factor podcast. I'm your host, Misha Blaymeyer-Farish. Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram, as I love connecting with our listeners to hear how you are getting shit done in your personal and professional life. Be sure to visit our website at gstfactor.com, where you can take a persona assessment that's going to help you figure out what type of GSDer you are. There's also a ton of resources and tools for both yourself and your tiny humans in your life. We appreciate you rating and subscribing our podcast episode today. And don't forget to get shit done.